Jason. It's my job to stump. Hey everybody, it's Carrie Hoffmeister with Carry On Abundant TV, and today I am super excited to have on author and speaker Chris Widener. Chris, thanks so much for chatting with me today.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yes, I'm excited to chat with you. Chris is a motivational speaker. You have a lot of different titles. I mean, I could have gone through all of them. It'll say like top 50 motivational speaker, top 10 in sales speaker, top, all these things. So there you go.
Yep. I've been at it a long time. I probably started speaking before you were born, Carrie.
You may have.
I started my professional speaking career in 1988, and I'm guessing you were born after 1988.
I was born in 87.
Oh, wow.
So
I
I
need
was
your
one.
skincare regimen then.
It's good genes, I think. But
Hey.
yes, skincare is good too. All right, Chris. Well, since I've never had you on the show before, I always like for my guests to give a little bit of their background so that people at home watching can get to know you a little bit better. So if you just want to give us a little bit of your background and maybe what has happened in your life that made you become an author and motivational speaker.
Yeah, I've had a crazy life, and I'll try and make it short. In fact, if I ever write my memoirs, I've decided it's either going to be called It's a Mostly Wonderful Life or All the People I've Met. So
Oh,
life started out pretty good. First 4 years was pretty good. My dad was the fifth partner at what is now one of the largest architecture firms in the world. He was making $90,000 a year in 1969. But in 1970, he got cancer and died at the age of 41, and he only had $30,000 worth of life insurance, even though he was making $90,000 in income. And my mom hadn't worked outside the home for about 15 years, and she couldn't afford the outrageous $400 a month mortgage payment. And so she had to sell a house, which was in one of the swankiest country clubs in Seattle. That house recently sold for $3.8 million. And that began a downward
wow.
spiral. My mom had borderline personality disorder, which made it kind of rough. I ended up living 28 homes, 11 different schools. My mom shipped me off to live with relatives twice, once in the fourth grade, once in the ninth grade. Started drugs in the sixth grade, started smoking opium in the eighth grade. I made my money growing up betting the horses at Longacres Horse Track, which doesn't exist anymore in Seattle. And then I became a Christian the summer before my senior year of high school, ended up going to Bible college, became a youth minister. I majored in youth and family ministry, and moved to a little town called Mendham, New Jersey, which is one of the wealthiest zip codes in America, and was a youth pastor there. And that's where I met some really successful business people, like the gentleman from Mars Candies. And It was really significant to me. I've had a lot of great mentors along the way. And then in 1992, I moved to Seattle, back to my hometown. I spent the first 50 years of my life in Seattle, except for 3 years in New Jersey. And I started a church. And then I started two other churches out of that. So they call it a church planter when you just start it. And I started three churches in the greater Seattle area. And then in 2002, because when you start a church, there isn't a congregation to, help pay your salary. I had to do other things. And so that's when I started doing motivational speaking. And mostly it started out speaking to high school summer camps, colleges, universities, talking about how to overcome troubled youth. But in 2002, I decided to go and do that full time, write and speak full time. And over the course of the next 7 years, the doors just opened up incredibly for me to work with and be mentored by three of the greatest legends in the speaking world. A guy named John Maxwell, who many people who study leadership will know, sold 35 million books. I wrote his syndicated column for 2 years. And then a guy named Jim Rohn. Some of you will, when I say Jim Rohn, I get three responses: either, wow, he's the greatest guy I've ever heard of, or never heard of him, or is he the guy on ESPN? Well, no, that's Jim Rome, not Jim Rohn. And Jim has been made even more famous because a guy named Tony Robbins. He gave Tony Robbins his first job. When Tony was 17 years old, he went door to door selling tickets to Jim Rohn seminars.
Oh,
And then lastly, a guy named Zig Ziglar, who I think is probably the greatest motivational speaker of the 20th century, asked me to co-host his television show. So it's been an amazing journey from really a really crazy upbringing and start to having a lot of impact. I've given 2,500 speeches all over the world. I've written 25 books. I'm just started my 26th book. Some of those books have been translated into 14 languages. One of those books, The Angel Inside, was #2 on the Wall Street Journal and #7 on the New York Times. So it's been a crazy life and it's been a lot of fun. I've had a lot of ups and I've had quite a few downs as well, which is sort of typical of life.
Wow, that's amazing. As you were telling your story, I just related to like so many things
Yeah.
that we can talk about later. But
Yeah.
so with motivational speaking, when you hear that, it's kind of can be like a broad term. What are the different types of things that you do speak on? I know you mentioned youth was one of them, but I know
Yeah.
there's several other things that you talk about. What are those other things that you speak about?
Well, it's interesting. I say motivational speaker simply because it sort of captured, most people can kind of picture it in their mind when you say motivate, but I actually kind of don't like the term motivational speaker. And here's why. And you may, I don't know if you remember this or not, but Saturday Night Live used to have a skit with Chris Farley called Matt Foley Motivational Speaker. And so, he lived in a van down by the river, ate a steady diet of government cheese. So really pretty much what I've been doing the last 20 years is leadership speaking. I speak to leadership teams and I speak to sales teams. And the reason I speak to those two primarily is because I wrote a book called The Art of Influence. And the subtitle is Persuading Others Begins with You. And it's about how to persuade other people, but it's not necessarily about techniques of persuasion, like how to make arguments, how to handle objections, those kinds of things. It's more about who we are and our own character development, because ultimately people do business with people they know, like, and trust. And that the liking and the trusting comes from who you are as a person. So instead of just focusing on what to do to other people to convince them, it's more about developing yourself so that other people know, like, and trust you. And when they know, like, and trust you, then it's easier for you to communicate your message and they're more likely to hear it and act on it. So mostly what I talk about nowadays is influence. I do a little bit of political speaking, and I'm beginning to do a lot more speaking in the Christian world as well.
That's really good. Thank you for sharing that. You do have a new book out. I know you've written, 25 books, like you said,
Yep.
and you have a new one out called The Coming American Revival. Can
Yep.
you share a little bit with us about your new book?
Yeah, and some people think it's a prediction or a prophecy or something like that, and it's not. What I call it is a declaration of faith. I really believe that we have gotten to a point in America where people are sort of realizing that there's a spiritual bankruptcy, and so we've got all this other stuff going on, but we forgot to tend to our spirit. Typically people, when they want to focus on personal development, aside from money and those kinds of things, when we're looking at ourselves, almost everybody goes to health. And the reason they go to health is because we're too fat, or our skin's getting wrinkly, or whatever. We want to present well. And that's the first thing that we see when we meet a person. We don't see their character, we don't see their spirituality, we don't even see their emotional health. We see their body. And so when we think about it, it's like, I want to present the best body. That's why we go to the gym and we work out and we eat right and all these kinds of things. But I think what we really are missing is that spiritual character. And so the question of the book is what is the state of America spiritually? And what would revival look like? And revival, you use the word revival and you think of these old tent preachers and people jumping the
Hmm.
pews and talking in tongues and walking the sawdust trail and raising their hand, all that kind of stuff. Revival literally just means to come to life again. It means life again. And so I'm actually starting a show on Abundant TV, and it's called Revive Your Life. And
Yay!
it's about reviving your spirituality, but reviving your emotions, reviving your health, reviving your marriage, reviving your money. You bringing it back to life again. And so I just really believe that no politician is ever going to solve our problems in America, because the political problem is not our problem. The political problem is a symptom of a spiritual problem. And spirituality begins with the individual. And
Hmm.
so the Coming American Revival is really pretty much about starts with personal revival, getting back to your spiritual roots, finding that place to be able to center yourself and to I believe that that God created us with body, soul, and spirit. So body is, you know, the tangible stuff. Soul is that part of us which we know exists, but we can't see it or touch it. Things like mind, will, and emotion. So there's a difference between your brain, which is body, and your mind, which is soul. And then spirit is that part of us that is designed to live eternally. And it's the part of us that communicates with our creator. So I believe that it starts with spirituality, and spirituality drives mental, which drives physical. And you know, you've probably heard of psychosomatic disease, right? Where your brain tells you you're sick, and so your body gets sick. These three things are totally connected. Your mind, will, or your body, soul, and spirit are all connected and interconnected, and they affect one another. And so often people will focus on one area of their life to the detriment of the other. You know, you might find some guy that's just totally, or some gal that's just totally jacked and they're physically fit, no fat, but they're dumber than a box of rocks, right? Or you might find somebody who's super, super spiritual, lovely, kind, wonderful person, broke as a joke. And so what we need to understand is that if we really want to be holistically healthy, we have to take this perspective that we have to address body, soul, and spirit. And most people, the predominant one that people focus on is body. The secondary is soul, but the most important one is spirit. And that's usually the one that gets left behind.
That's really good. I think that something that so many people struggle with now is finding the balance of it all. Like you
Yeah.
said, it's either, oh, I need to change the way I eat, or I need to get into the gym, or I need to focus on this. And it's hard to find that healthy balance of everything to make everything healthy and right.
Yeah.
So, what kind of journey did you go on before writing this book to get to this point to write it, or research did you
Well,
do?
I've had a lot of ups and downs in my life spiritually. I mean, I was a pastor, and then you know, I went through a kind of a, some people call it a dark night of the soul, or wandering in the wilderness, you know, whatever you want to call it, a dry time of the dry season, those kinds of things where I really kind of, I wouldn't say I fell away from God, but I moved away from God. And I just realized how bankrupt that life is. And so I was writing another book to be my 25th book. I was writing a book on capitalism, and I really felt like God was pushing me to write a book on revival. So I started researching a little bit. There has not been a book on revival that's been widely distributed in America since the 1950s, when a guy named Leonard Ravenhill wrote a book called Why Revival Tarries. And there's not been a widespread revival in America where there's a well-known and visible renewal of Christianity since the early 1970s, with the Jesus People movement, which, you know, ended up birthing the Calvary Chapel movement. It was made famous in a movie a couple of years ago called The Jesus Revolution. And I started researching revivals. So we had the first Great Awakening, the second Great Awakening, third Great Awakening. Then we had the Azusa Street revival in the early 1900s in Los Angeles, and then we had the Jesus People Revolution in the 1970s. Azusa Street was the early 1900s. So what I realized was it's about every 50 to 70 years when we have revival in America. And so if you look at the early 1970s, we're at about 55 years since the last widespread revival. And what's interesting is we're seeing lots of rebirth of revival, little bubblings of
Mhm.
revival, and it's almost predominantly college students. I live in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and so about 15 minutes north of us is Cleveland, Tennessee, where you have Lee College. And about 3, 4 years ago, the kids went in for chapel one day and didn't leave for 2 weeks. It ended up making national news. I
Mhm.
know Tucker Carlson did two segments on it, and then he sent a team up to go video it. And he wasn't the only one. Whether it was the right wing media or the left wing media or the mainstream media, they were all taking note. Texas A&M, and in the historically Black colleges and universities, there's a movement. I can't remember the name of it, but I talk about it in the book. There's a movement amongst the HBCUs as well, and so we're seeing a lot of these kids, and I find it interesting that it's starting with kids because they're the ones who use the most technology. They're the
Hmm.
ones who are in college and they're learning and they're everything. They've got this bombardment of technology and education and learning and then all the pressures, the social pressures that kids are under. It's fascinating to me that most of this revival is breaking out amongst college kids. In fact, my daughter just went to an event in Atlanta over Christmas break, actually right after Christmas break, after the first of the new year. It was a 2 or 3 day conference that they do in Atlanta called the Passion Conference. And I think they do it 2 or 3 times a year. And there were 20,000 kids there. And they fly in
Wow.
from all over the country. She's getting her doctorate at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And I think she went down there with 5 or 6 kids from her college. So it's pretty inspiring to see God working in the midst of younger people.
Yeah, we've seen it here too. Well, so I live in Michigan, so the fact that I'm even going to say this word, a lot of people, Michiganders, are going to hate me for this, but Ohio State actually, they have broken out in revival here at the beginning of their school year. A lot of the football players, they were just having revival on campus, and it was such a beautiful thing to see. And it is interesting to see that it is young kids because I feel like a lot of people now are like, this younger generation has no hope, but they are our hope, you know? So, what would you say to somebody who is just really struggling with their purpose right now?
I think your purpose is found in your giftedness and your talents.
Mm,
And there's a difference between giftedness and talents. Giftedness is what God gave you that you're naturally good at.
that's good.
I am naturally good at speaking. I've been yapping my gums since I was a kid. In fact, after I became a highly paid, well-known, internationally well-known speaker, my mother said to me one time, it was so funny. She said, "I can't believe people pay you to do what I was telling you to stop all the time." So growing up, do you remember? You remember in high school, and right after the first buzzer rings, and everybody sits down, and then the intercom comes on and says, "Good morning, everybody. It's June or it's May 5th, and
Yeah.
lunch today is going to be fish sticks and tater tots. And if you're on the football team, the bus will be ready to leave by 4 o'clock. And football game this week's at home." I did that. I
No
was
way.
I was the morning and now please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, and I did that in college. I was the in-house college basketball announcer. So I did at the college basketball games, I did the starting lineups, and every time somebody scored a basket, I said their name, and every time a player came in, now coming into the game, Roger Jones, whatever. So I've always done that. I did drive time radio in Seattle. I did television in Dallas. I had a couple TV shows there. And so when I think about me as a public speaker, I kind of joke with people who are thinking about hiring me. They'll ask me, do you ever get nervous, or can you talk about, this or whatever? And I always tell them, look, I never get afraid of speaking. If right now you said to me, "Hey, there's a crowd of 100,000 people standing outside and you need to go out and give them a 30-minute speech," I wouldn't bat an eyelash. I'd just walk right up there and start talking. However, there's things I'm not good at. So I tell people, look, I can get up and give an hour-long speech with no notes and never feel a hint of embarrassment or fear or anything. But if you asked me to go out there and sing the national anthem, I'd be terrified because I'm a horrible singer. If you asked me to paint a picture in front of an audience, I'd be terrified. So it really comes from your giftedness. And some people have everybody has a natural giftedness. Some people are naturally gifted at drawing. Some
Mhm.
people are naturally gifted at speaking. Some people are naturally gifted at mathematics and those kinds of things. But then you have talents. And talents are things that you can increase. It might not be your
Mm.
natural giftedness, but it's a talent that you've developed. And so I remember one time I gave a speech in Seattle a long time ago, and you'll be able to tell from the story. But I just given a speech, and I still actually had the microphone in my hand for some reason. It was right after the speech, and this guy came up to me in Seattle, and he said, how in the world can you give a 30-minute speech with no notes? And I said, well, you could give a speech. And I didn't even know the guy. I said, well, I'm sure you could give a 30-minute speech with no notes. And he said, oh, no, I could never do that. And I said, well, I think you can, and I'll prove it to you. I said, what do you do for a living? He said, I'm an engineer at Boeing. And I said, what are you working on right now? And he said, I'm a wing designer for the new 777. And I said, if I handed you this microphone right now and said, give me 30-minute overview on how to develop a wing for an airplane and how a wing works and all that kind of stuff, could you do it? And he goes, oh, yeah, I could do that. Right. So he was probably naturally gifted at engineering, like that kind of science mind. But then his talent was taking his giftedness and learning about aerodynamics and wing design and all those kinds of things. So finding your purpose, I really believe, is your giftedness and your talent matched with the needs of the people who you're serving. Because
Mm,
I really believe that purpose is found in serving. You know, I'm just going to make $10 million. That's not really a purpose. It's a goal, but it's not a purpose. Now, if your purpose is to serve people and to create a restaurant that serves people and allows couples to come there and enjoy time away from the children and reignite their relationship and those kinds of things, you might make $10 million, but your purpose is doing that. And I'll say this because it just sort of jogged my memory when we talk about restaurants. You have to redefine what you do. So, for example, somebody might say, excuse me, they might say, well, I'm just a waitress. I'm just a server. I work at a little restaurant and I'm just a server. And I always say, you are not just a server. And they're like, well, what do you mean? And I go, you're a person who allows a couple to leave their children at home with a
mm,
babysitter and they get to reignite their relationship. They get time alone. Your
mm,
purpose is to serve them, not just hand them a plate of food, but to strip away all of those things to allow that man and that woman to be able to reconnect, even if it's just one night a week. That's your purpose. Your job is to hand food to them, but your purpose is to do that. Your job might be to be a musician and to play good music, but your purpose is to inspire the soul with your music and those
mm,
kinds of things. So don't just ask, what's my job? Ask, what does that job do for humanity? And I
mm.
think that that's a really good way of reconnecting with what your purpose is in the world.
That was amazing. I've never ever heard anything like that about somebody's purpose. And if anybody takes anything away, I know I took something away from that is that I think that is something that so many people ask about too is like, well, I just don't know what my purpose is now. Or a mother who is used to working and felt her purpose in that is now staying at home with her kids and she's lost her purpose. And I think that mindset can help so many people in what they do in life. That was awesome. That's really good. So it sounds like mindset is a really important thing when it comes to something like that. But when you're talking about, so I know you don't like the word motivational speaker, but you've kind of proved that you are because you're
Yeah,
very motivational. But is mindset something that is really important for people, like an important tool for people to have to be successful and motivated in life? Is
absolutely.
okay.
Absolutely. Your mindset and your belief system is what I call the thermostat of life. So I'll give you an analogy. First of all, think of a thermostat. If you have your thermostat set at 70 degrees and you have it set at that it'll turn on the heat or the air conditioning, depending upon the temperature, imagine you set it at 70 degrees and you live in Scottsdale, Arizona, which I used to live in Scottsdale, and it can get 115, 120 degrees. So I've got it set at 70 and I open the door and that warm air starts coming in. The temperature starts to move up and the thermostat says, wait a minute, it's getting too hot. We need to turn the AC on. It turns the AC on and it brings it back to where it believes it should be. Now, I live in
Mm,
Chattanooga now, and it happens to be very cold and snowing today. So if I were to go downstairs and the thermostat set at 70 and I open the door, it's going to start dropping. And the thermostat's going to say, uh-oh, we are supposed to be at 70 degrees. We're going to turn on the heat. It kicks on the heat and it starts moving that temperature back because that's what the mindset or the belief system is that it's supposed to be 70 degrees. Now let me
mm,
transfer it into how human beings work. We've all heard of somebody who was 50 pounds overweight and they've been overweight their whole life because they ate garbage when they were growing up. Maybe their
Mm-hmm.
parents weren't diligent at making them learn how to eat correctly and those kinds of things. And so they've always been overweight. Well, what do they think of themselves? They think of themselves as a fat person. I'm a fat person. They actually identify as a fat person. So for 30 years or 40 years, they've said, I'm a fat person. Now they decide I got to get healthy. I want to live long for my kids and my family. And so they learn what to do. So they want to have weight loss. So they do the things that will create weight loss. But even below that is their belief system. Your beliefs create what you do, and your do creates what you have. And so they lose weight, they learn what to do, and they lose weight, but they start looking in the mirror and they go, well, I'm a fat person. Even if it's at a subconscious level, I'm a fat
Mm-hmm.
person and I don't look like a fat person anymore. This is why so many people lose 50 pounds and they gain 60 pounds back, because their belief system and their identity is that they're fat. Maybe you grew up in a household where maybe your parents didn't go to college, or they lower middle class, and they say, we're not those kinds of people. We're not those rich people. We're middle class people. Who do you think you are wanting to go to college? We don't go to college. That's not the kind of people. Rich people, they step on people, they cheat people, they do these things. So you've got a mindset that money is bad. So you
Mm-hmm.
grow up and you don't make much money. You make maybe $40,000-$50,000 a year, 30, 40, $50,000 a year. And then one day you're at the convenience store and you see that the lotto, look at the lotto. Wow, $2 million. And it's only $1. I'm going to buy a ticket. They buy a ticket, they win $2 million. There was actually a TV show called Lottery Ruined My Life. And so now all of a sudden, this poor person who identifies as a poor person, and many of them take pride in it, now all of a sudden they have $2 million in their bank account. And they're used to only seeing $400 in their bank account. Their subconscious says, whoa, way too much money in here. We got to get it back down. This is why people win the lottery and they're broke 3 years later. And it happens
Wow.
all the time. So your belief about who you are and what you can be is the most important thing possible for creating the reality that you want to create. And a lot of that is at a subconscious level. So think about the words that you say about yourself. The Bible says that the tongue has the power of life and death. So
Mm-hmm.
if you're saying, well, I'm fat, or I'm not smart, or I'm broke, or I'm this, you're just reinforcing with your language what you really believe, and it ends up creating your reality. You need to change those things and change your belief system and change your mindset and change the thoughts that you think.
So, real quick then, what is a tip for how do you change your mindset? If somebody's like, I don't know how to change my mindset. This is how I've been my whole life. How do you do that?
Couple things. First of all, get around people who are more successful than you.
Mm,
I'm pretty successful. I had a great life. I've had a great life. I've made good money, and those kinds of things. But I have a goal. I want to be the dumbest, poorest person in every room I go into.
wow.
So if I'm the dumbest and
Yeah.
poorest person of every room I go into, that means I'm surrounding myself with pretty great people.
Hmm.
And I've been, as I mentioned earlier, I've been very fortunate to have great mentors. And the two churches I served in, a lot of the parishioners were successful people. And I don't just mean money. I mean in life and in
Hmm.
health and in business and in family and all those kinds of things. Jim Rohn always said that you will become like the people you hang around with. The 5 people you hang around with are the people you're going to be like. Other people have said you will become like the books you read and the people you hang around with, which leads me to my second one. Always be a lifelong learner. Start reading good books that are going to challenge your mindset, that are going to give you new information. Put down the beach novel, put down the Harlequin romance, put down People magazine, and start picking up stuff that's going to help you become a better person. And
Yeah.
lastly, I would say this: one of the best things you can do is to read biographies, specifically autobiographies. Autobiographies, that means that the author wrote the book. It's not a book about the person, it's the book the person wrote. And the
Hmm.
reason why is, you and I can never go have lunch with Thomas Edison, but we could spend 8 or 10 hours with Thomas Edison by
Hmm.
reading a book.
Yeah.
I'm probably never going to get a chance to meet Elon Musk, but I could read a book about Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos or, any of those kinds of people. And so read biographies and see what they went through. Because one of the things you're going to be surprised about is how some of the most successful people in world history had really crappy things happen to them.
Hmm.
Most people say, oh boy, sure, wouldn't it be nice to be that person? Well, I'll tell you, I've met a lot of wealthy people, rock stars, professional athletes, congressmen, business people, you name it. I've been around them. You know what? They all have problems. It might be a bankruptcy in their past. It might be they're on their second marriage. It might be that they have a health issue. They might have a child who went awry or astray. Don't look at people who are more successful than you and go, oh, they had an easy road. They didn't have an easy road. I always
Hmm.
say the difference between the successful and the unsuccessful is not the absence of obstacles, but it's the presence of perseverance. Successful people had just as many obstacles as you did, and in fact, sometimes more, but
Hmm.
they persevered to the other side.
That's so good. Thank you so much for sharing that. That I feel like I could talk to you for hours with all these different things, but I really appreciate you coming on the show today and sharing this. And you do have your new book, The Coming American Revival, which is out that people can purchase, but you also have 24 other books on some of these topics that we've talked about.
Yeah.
Where is the best place that people can go to find your books and you?
Yeah, find the book. They can go to comingamericanrevival.com. That'll take them straight into Amazon. If they go to chriswidener.com and hit the store button, that'll take them to my page on Amazon where they can get all the books and the audios and all those kinds of things. But comingamericanrevival.com if you're interested in spirituality, and then just chriswidener.com and hit the store, and that'll take you to all the personal development, motivational books and things like that. My email is chris@chriswidener.com. If there's any way that I can help you in any way, you just let me know. And I do personal coaching and some of those kinds of things as well.
That's awesome. Chris, thank you so much. It has been just an honor to chat with you today.
Thanks, Carrie. I really appreciate it. My first show I've ever done on Abundant TV, and it was with you. I'll always remember that.
Woohoo! Yeah, and he's coming on Abundant TV, so stay tuned. You will be able to see his show on Abundant TV soon, right? Do we have
Yep.
a date of when that's coming out?
Yeah, I'm actually very terribly sick this week, and so I was supposed to
Oh,
start. I was supposed to start yesterday, but it's going to be next week, and it's called Revive Your Life, and
okay.
it's about all the different areas of life and how you can bring them to life again.
And what day is that going to be on, or
I'm
days?
I'm hoping it's going to be next Thursday.
Okay. So you can watch mine on Tuesday, and then you can watch Chris's on Thursday. You can watch
Yeah.
both because we're going to be battling it out, right?
There
Just
we
kidding.
go.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for watching at home. Thank you for watching Abundant TV. And just remember until next time to carry on.